Hello everyone, Tactical Lich here and welcome back to another tournament spotlight with a best of 3 from the Warpstone Cup. Today we are featuring two players, Palpatine on the green side and LambSauceKing on the red side. In this first battle, it would be two aggressive factions, Beastmen versus Greenskins, Palpatine with a Pestigore and Angor Spear Herd front line, backed up by a ton of Centaur mobility, 3 regular melee Centaurs, and 4 more throwing axes. They're supported by a Jabber's Life and 2 characters, one of them the Brave Shaman of Death with Spirit Leech and Doom and Darkness to exploit the low leadership of Greenskins. And the leadership wise, we have Kazarek One Eye coming in with only Apocalyptic Vision and the Dark Mail for additional tankiness. On the other side of the battlefield for LambSauceKing's Greenskins, a front line of Goblins, second line of Squig Herds, for a rather killy front line, using the Goblins to pin down enemy troops and then Squig Herds to grind through their infantry. Third line of Orc Area Boys, flanked by a ton of Orc Boar Biggins, 4 of them in fact backed up by a couple Troll units. One of them Stone Trolls, the other the terror causing the Swamp Things with a bit of a melee attack debuff. Leading the army a Night Goblin Warboss with his controlling toolkit, Fermented Fungi and Tormentor Sword, most likely using them to limit the mobility movement of their enemies. As for the magic department, a Giant River Troll hack with only Fate of Buna. Now let's get the battle started, as both armies are just moving up towards each other. There's no skirmishing game here, as the Greenskins are semi-boxing, just holding their position and ready to rain down air fire onto enemy troops with their Orc Air Boys. The Beastmen mobility are circling to the sides of the battlefield. They're probably looking for openings to break through into the Greenskin backline. Kazarek One Eye plowing straight through the Goblins, but might be getting a bit ahead of himself, as he is now tied down by a ton of Orc Boar Biggins with their anti-large and armor-piercing damage. Jabber's Life also jumping into combat, doing some really good damage to the Goblins. But here comes the Stone Trolls and the Swamp Things piling onto the Beastman monster. The Senegals at the back are doing some skirmishing work here, and the Senegals over here charging into the Orc Boar Biggins, but the Orc Boar Biggins with the Giant River Troll hack should be able to break these Senegals over time. But with the throwing axis support, things are hard to say over here. Anyways, in the middle, big blob fight. Kazarek still tied in a bunch of Orc Boar Biggins, a bit of a Doom and Darkness breaking some of these Goblins, and a big wow from the Greenskins, boosting up the melee power of all these Greenskin units, and this might actually win the fight for the Orc Boar Biggins. The Goblins are also holding up just fine. Centaur is charging into the Orc Area Boys, but unfortunately with the WA boosting up their melee power, all that melee extra damage and attack, they were actually able to beat up the Senegals in melee combat, as the Orc Air Boys themselves are pretty decent in melee. Pestigore is still grinding through a bunch of Goblins and Squig Herds, but they're taking quite a bit of damage over time, while the Swamp Things and Stone Trolls are still holding up just fine with their regeneration. Fate of Buna onto the Senegals, draining their health away, and that is 1 unit deleted from the Beastmen. There are still some more Sentinels, as they do have 4 units, and the throwing axis eventually whittled down the Orc Boar Biggins, but not before the Boar Biggins push back the Sentinels in melee. The Jabber's Life still fighting in a horde of Stone Trolls and the Swamp Things, while Kazarek is over here tied down by a ton of Orc Boar Biggins and the Night Goblin War Boss. I assume the Night Goblin War Boss has used up all his control abilities, because this would be a good time to keep Kazarek pinned in the mix of a bunch of anti-large cavalry. More Senegals charging into the backline with the help of Brave Shaman. They are actually working through the Orc Air Boys, but here comes a second wah. That is a very quick second wah, actually. 3 minutes into the game and the Greenskins are getting a second massive damage spike. This once again gave the Orc Air Boys enough melee stats to beat back the Senegal charge in melee combat, and with the other Orc Air Boys shooting in, the Senegals are not long for this world. The wah was also really helpful for the Stone Trolls here, giving them that immune to psychology to stay in the fight against the Jabber's Life, beating up the Beastman monster. Of course, once the WoW wears off, immune to psychology is gone and the Stone Trolls are finally terror routed. Swamp Things though, they cause terror themselves, so they don't really care. Supported by the Giant River Troll hack, they are holding on just fine in this pocket. They don't have much support, but their attack debuff, aura, and regeneration will help them hold on. Kazarek is getting grind down by the Orc Boar Biggins, as he is completely pinned by the Bacon Cavalry. More Goblins swarming in, and with the help of the Squig Herds, breaking the Angor Spearman Herds. At this point, Greenskins are dominating the balance of power. The Beastman seems to be outclassed in every single engagement. Their front line lost against the Goblin and Squigs, Jabber's Life got beaten up by the Trolls, Senegals with throwing axes got attritioned down in their desperate attempt to silence those Orc Arrow Boys. Some Sentinels are still duking it out against the Orc Barbarians, but army losses is approaching. Jabber's Life breaks, everything routes, and there goes the first game, LambSauceKing claiming the first win. GG to the two players for the first game. I do think that Palpatine messed up some of his targeting priority. Kazarek went in too deep against the greenskin formations, and the Senegals should not have went into melee against the Orc Arrow Boys. Instead, the melee Senegals should be the ones going into melee to harass the Orc Arrow Boys back line. But then again, LambSauceKing did a really good job to defend his position, using the Orc Barbarians to pin down any incoming melee threats, and then the Orc Arrow Boys just shoot up the Senegals with throwing axes, or even just hold their ground and beat up the Senegals with throwing axes with the Wa boosting their attack stats. Squig Frontline and Goblins are also outclassing the Angor Spears and Pestigore combo, so very nice stuff from LambSauceKing for the first game. Now we will be moving on to the second one. The second battle is between two very flexible factions, the Empire of LambSauceKing and Palpatine's Warriors of Chaos. Palpatine going for a Marauder frontline great weapons and regular ones, backed up by a couple Bio Trolls and Halberd Warriors, a couple Horsemen with throwing axes to deal with the Empire Heavy Cav, and a single Horse Master. Leading the army, Kolek Sun Eater, and of course supported by the Nurgle Healing, a very potent melee combo, and then an Exalted Hero of Nurgle for his solid armor piercing value. For the other side of the battlefield, Spearmen in the front line, one of them the Grundle's Defenders. Not that there are any artillery to use the Rear Guardian, but I suppose that immune to psychology is very useful against any terror-causing roster. Behind them, 3 Huntsmen for their anti-large firepower. And then on the flanks, Empire Knights plus Demigryphs on each flank, leading the army Karl Franz, supported by an Empire Captain and a Celestial Wizard. Interesting spell choices here, with only Curse of the Midnight Wind and Harmonic Convergence. Now let's just get the battle started, as the Huntsmen already unleashing Bowfire onto the Marauder Horse Masters. But with all these forces coming in from the Empire left flank, they do have to be careful, because only a couple of these heavy cav is not enough to deal with all these throwing axes, javelins, and infantry swarming through. Especially Kolek is approaching that side. So the Empire army is now rotating the formation, but I do think that rotating the Huntsmen might be a risky maneuver, because when the Huntsmen are moving, they can't actually turn around and shoot. They have Firewall moving, but they don't have 360 fire arc, so they're losing out some time on shooting at enemy units. As a result, the Marauder frontline is left largely untouched while they are closing in. Spears are shifting towards the right. They do have to be careful though, because the enemies are close. Chaos is pulling back on this side, but on the far end, they are pushing up with a lot of forces. Huntsmen are a bit out of position, and they really need to pull back before they get caught in melee. While Karl Franz eating some javelins and throwing axes from the Marauder Cavalry, Empire Captain actually dove into the middle of a bunch of Bio Trolls. Very gutsy move here, but the Spearmen are also flooding into support, and Karl is jumping down as well. They do have to be careful, because Kolek Sun Eater is right behind them. Spears are moving up to try and intercept, while Huntsmen are now standing firm and starting to fire at the incoming forces. Some of them are shooting at the Horsemen, who are also throwing some axes in the direction of Demigryphs. Demigryphs got the charge on the Horsemen and are doing some good damage, but they won't be able to keep up due to their slower speed, so they probably should just stay back, allow the Huntsmen to shoot up the Horsemen instead. Over here, Empire Knights and Demigryphs are engaging in combat, trying to swarm the Bio Trolls with the support of spears. Franz and the Captain diving into the Horsemen, trying to push back the skirmishing cavalry, but here comes Kolek and his Star Crusher. Franz activating every single buff he has, trying to boost up his damage, but unfortunately Raglan Runefang is nullified by the Miasma of Pestilence. Kolek got debuffed by Curse of the Midnight Wind as well, but the Tempest Rage and Star Crusher gave him a massive damage boost. Franz, even on Deathclaw, is still not exactly a tanky lord, and after a few hits from Kolek, he is down to half health already. Franz decided it is no longer worth it fighting the Dragon Ogre, so he is backing off, but he has lost so much while Kolek is still so healthy, only a quarter of HP lost, and all he needs is a simple Fleshy Abundance to be full health again. So right now, Karl Franz is just moving over to somewhere else and find a better engagement. Demigryph Knights here are tied down by a bunch of anti-armor units. Great weapon, Marauders and Battle Trolls, they're not having a good time, especially Battle Trolls lowers surrounding units' melee defenses, so these Demogryph Knights are extremely susceptible to damage right now, being swarmed by superior numbers. Same goes for the Demogryphs over here. Surrounded by halberds and getting smacked by both the Nurgle hero and Kolek himself, they are taking a ton of damage. Demogryphs are terror routed, leaving the spears to fend for themselves. Kalfran's now getting stuck in the middle of a bunch of Marauder, Great Weapons, and Battle Trolls, exposing himself to all these armor-piercing throwing axe fire. This is really risky for the Empire, as Kalfran does not have access to healing. Any damage he takes is permanent, and he needs to get out of there as soon as possible to find a better engagement. Huntsmen are still online, and they're doing some really nice damage to the Chaos Skirmish Cav, but they're also under duress with all these Marauders flooding into the back line. Some of the Spears and Empire Knights are trying their damnedest to bail out the Huntsmen, but here comes Kolek once again, smashing a bunch of Huntsmen, so the Huntsmen are now running for their lives. Overall, it seems that the Warriors of Chaos are taking the upper hand here, as the Battle Trolls, Marauders, and their characters are crushing the poor Spears. Curse of Midnight Wind lowering the melee attack of the Chaos Forces, buying the Spears a little bit more time as the Chaos Forces have less damage output for now. Huntsman now turning around to shoot at Kolek, trying to work down his HP with their anti-large missiles, but Kolek having quite a bit missile resistance with his scaly skin, and on top of that 95 armor, he's just shrugging off all those arrows. On the other hand, France has disengaged from the Battle Trolls, with the Empire Captain and Empire Knights pinning down these monstrous infantry, allowing Karl Franz to drop in for a hammering charge, applying the terror effect onto the Battle Trolls. Now the Knights can chase off the Battle Trolls, preventing them from regenerating their HP and return. Still, the balance of power is ever so slightly in favor of the Warriors of Chaos, as Karl Franz has taken quite a bit of damage while the Empire front line has fallen apart, allowing their Huntsmen to be pressured by various Chaos forces. Marauders are chasing them down while the Empire Knights, who are supposed to be protecting them, are running for their lives from Kolek, who is returning to fight the rest of the Empire army. Grundle's defenders still holding on, but only barely, being immune to psychology. The fear from the Battle Trolls don't work on them, though inevitably they will still get grind down by the Halberd Warriors. Both Demogryphs are gone now, one of them being picked apart by the throwing axes. The other one stayed too long in the melee grind against enemy Battle Trolls, Halberd Warriors, and enemy characters. Franz still avoiding Kolek right now, who is still very much healthy, about half health, and then another heal coming in for him. Fleshy Abundance topping up his HP. Huntsman desperately trying to shoot at Kolek to bring down his HP, but unfortunately their DPS simply can't catch up with the heals. Franz and his captain are moving over to push back the horsemen, but they are actually returning to the main fight back in the middle, probably realizing that chasing after an armor-piercing skirmish cav is not a great idea because they're just gonna get shot in the face without any way to heal up the damage. They're just gonna come back and help out the state troops because the Empire Knights on the far side are still too busy chasing off the Battle Trolls. Franz though still has to be careful on picking his fights because Kolek is closely following behind. Now Franz decides to charge the Nurgle hero Huntsman firing at Kolek, but that is not gonna stop Kolek as he comes in with both of his damage buffs active, significantly boosting his DPS while Franz himself being debuffed by Miasma of Pestilence. In just a few swings, Kolek managed to slay the Emperor and his Griffin mount. With their lord dead, the state troops' leadership crumbles, army losses kicks in, and that shall be game. Very strong performance from Kolek in this second battle, giving Papa Palpatine the win to stay in this best of 3, 2,400 gold worth of damage value, basically crushing everything in his way with his giant hammer. The rest of the Chaos army didn't do that good overall. The horsemen actually didn't earn back their own value. Halberd still dragged down quite a bit of the Empire heavy cav, so got some pretty good damage done. The rest of the Chaos army not so much. Some of the Marauders did fine by cutting down the Huntsmen, while on the other side the Empire Huntsmen earned back their value and then some more. Unfortunately, whatever damage they dealt to Kolek simply got healed back up by the Fleshy Abundance. Karl Franz got bullied by Kolek and his damage buffs, so very unfortunate there. The Emperor was not able to lead his army to victory. Personally, not a big fan of Karl Franz. He is just too fragile and you always need to pair him up with a healing caster to actually get the value out of him. So in this case, no healing and just a Celestial Wizard was a rather lethal combo for the Empire themselves, as Karl Franz was not able to recover from any mistakes he made. Now, with both players getting one win in this best of 3, we'll be moving on to a third battle to decide who is the real winner of this best of 3 series. Third and final battle of the series, Papa Palpatine going for Khorne versus LambSauceKing with Tinge. Papa Palpatine's frontline is rather heavy metal in terms of their core. 3 units of Chaos Warriors of Khorne, flanked by a couple Marauders of Khorne. They're backed up by a ton of mobility, 3 throwing axes, and 4 Chaos Furies in the skies, one of them already going after the Tinge Furies. Leading the army, Scarbrand the Exile alongside another Bloodthirster, 2 very hard-hitting single entities for the Khorne army. For Tinge though, a bunch of mobility in the form of Senegals of Tinge, 3 of them scattered across the battlefield. Other than the summoned Chaos Furies, there's also 4 units of Tinge Furies all over the place. Normally in a one-on-one fight, Khorne Furies will beat Tinge Furies no issue at all, but there's also the Exalted Lord of Change in the fray, so Tinge actually is winning this mobility engagement alongside the summoned Furies. The rest of the Tinge army, a front line of Marauders, second line of Sour Guts and Pink Horrors, providing some pretty nice firepower, shooting down some of the Chaos Furies already, and another unit of Chaos Warriors of Tinge with Halberds, and that's it for both army builds. The Exalted Lord of Change, after beating up some Chaos Furies of Khorne, decided to back off there as the Bloodthirster is in the fray, while over here, Chaos Furies of Tinge are piling on to the Khorne Furies, doing some pretty nice work as their numbers advantage really shine through in this engagement. While the Exalted Lord of Change not having any spells to deal with single entities, this might be a bit of a problem, especially into the late game if the Bloodthirsters survive. Searing Doom and Plague of Rust only, so mostly probably expecting to deal with enemy heavy metal rush with more infantry and cavalry instead of the double Bloodthirster build. So right now the Marauder Horsemen are being pressured by the Tinge Furies and are now actually trying to run through their own troops to get to safety and get on top of the Sour Guts and Pink Horrors, but unfortunately some of them are caught in the melee against Marauders and Senegals of Tinge and are taking substantial damage. One unit of Marauder Horsemen actually got into melee against the Pink Horrors, but here comes some more Marauders of Tinge to push back the Horsemen of Khorne. Now over here, Bloodthirsters are ganging up on the Senegals of Tinge, doing some really good damage. A bit of the Plague of Rust, upgraded version onto the Chaos Warriors of Khorne, but nothing is really targeting them with any non-armor piercing attacks, so it is a bit of a wasted debuff spell currently. Perhaps the Sour Guts can shoot at the Warriors, but if anything, the Sour Guts and the Pink Horrors should be focused firing on to Scarbrand and the Bloodthirster, because there's not really anything that can deal with the double Bloodthirster easily in this build. Perhaps the Tinge army can surround the double Bloodthirsters with Halberds and Tinge Senegals, but it is easier said than done when the Halberd Warriors are too slow to catch the double Bloodthirsters. On the far side, Exalted Lord of Change and a Summoned Fury are chasing off some throwing axes because they don't really have a good way to pressure the mobility of the Khorne army. Senegals of Tinge charging into the Marauders of Khorne, doing some really good damage on impact, but they need to start moving out though, because the Khorne Marauders, they do have pretty good attack stats, so once they recompose themselves from the charge impact, they will start hitting back and the lightly armored Tentacles will start feeling the pain. Sour Guts now being hit by the Bloodthirster as the Bloodthirsters dive down to really prioritize eliminating this Tinge firepower, and the Tinge mobility is not in the position to help as they are too busy chasing off the throwing axes. Khorne Warriors pressuring the Pink Horrors while the Tinge Marauders desperately trying to stop them from chasing the Tinge Demons, but here comes Scarbrand and his dual axes aiming straight for the Pink Horrors of Tinge, putting a hit, and there's nothing nearby to save the Pink Horrors. Chaos Warriors are just kind of ignoring the Marauders of Tinge, trying to go after the Pink Horrors while a Rage embodied from Scarbrand rampaging the Pink Horrors into melee combat, so the Pink Horror were not able to keep kiting and shooting as they are now dragged in melee combat to their demise. On the far side, the Lord of Change and his summoned Furies managed to catch some horsemen before the Furies disappear. The horsemen are still running for their lives, but in come the Tentacles with a head-on charge. The horsemen are now being caught in melee and unable to escape, but the Tentacles are also exposed to the Bloodthirster, using his great axes to take out huge chunks of health from the Tentacles. The Tentacles have been terrified, allowing the horsemen to run off with some health left, though we're not sure if they're coming back or not. The bigger problem is that the Lord of Change is now stuck in melee against the Bloodthirster. He's paying a dear price as he is unable to do much against the Bloodthirster, while the great axe of the Bloodthirster is doing a ton of damage to him instead. Now back to the middle, the Halberd Warriors are slowly grinding down the Khorne Warriors with their armor piercing, allowing the Sour Guts to escape, though it will take them some time. And time is not exactly on Tzeentch's side here, as Skarbrand has finished off the pink horse. Nothing really is stopping the Khorne single entities from running over all the remaining Tzeentch units. Another Plague of Rust onto the Khorne Warriors. Not sure what this one is gonna do here, because the Chaos Warriors do have armor piercing with their halberds. And the Sour Guts are not in the position of firing, as Skarbrand has charged into their ranks. Now Skarbrand is just gonna tear down these elite pink horrors, and unfortunately all the ammo will go to waste. The Exalted Lord of Change is kind of roaming in the field, and not sure what he's trying to do here, but perhaps he should be in this engagement trying to terror out the Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch, because right now Skarbrand is still very busy dealing with the Sour Guts, and Tzeentch halberds are now fighting unsupported by anything other than the Marauders against the Bloodthirster, and the Tzeentch halberds are taking quite some bit of noticeable damage, partly because some of them are forced to turn around and fight the Khorne Warriors as the Bloodthirster hacks them down. And with the Khorne Warriors screening, the Bloodthirster is able to pull out of the halberds. Now the Exalted Lord of Change thought about diving in, but unfortunately the landing bug has occurred and he was not able to land and get a hit in. Instead he got hit in mid-air by the Bloodthirster, and that was not exactly a great situation for Tzeentch. Now the halberds are busy dealing with Skarbrand the Exile, a bit of a searing doom here, trying to thin out some of the remaining Khorne infantry support bombarding these Marauders here. But the Exalted Lord of Change is still being pushed off by the Bloodthirster, and the halberds are now alone against Skarbrand, which can fight against infantry pretty nicely, especially when there are some Marauders of Tzeentch shielding him from hits from the halberds. Now on the far side, some Senegals of Tzeentch managed to return after chasing off some Horsemen of Khorne. However, the double Bloodthirsters are fighting back to back now, and this is getting very tricky for the Tzeentch army. Skarbrand sallies forth to fight the Tentacles. Rage Embodied forcing the Senegals to stay in the fight, and now the second Bloodthirsters charges in, and the Senegals of Tzeentch, despite doing some pretty nice damage against Skarbrand, they are taking a lot of damage in return, and oh no, the Exalted Lord of Change got a little too close to Skarbrand, who had Rage Embodied activated, and he was forced to dive down to attack Skarbrand. Now the Rage Embodied worn off and the Rampage is gone as well, but the Exalted Lord of Change is already knees deep in melee against the double Bloodthirster. Skarbrand is taking more and more damage from the halberds and Sentinels of Tzeentch, but the Sentinels of Tzeentch has been terror routed off. Now the Bloodthirsters are dominating the battlefield. Balance of power is in the favor of Khorne. Marauders and halberds are coming in trying to help out against the double Bloodthirster and bail out the Exalted Lord of Change, but very nice, very patient use of the army ability from Palpatine here, saving up all the points and just unleashing a devastating Sword of Khorne onto all these blobbed up Tzeentch troops. And at this point there's nothing for the Tzeentch army to support the Exalted Lord of Change to fight against the double Bloodthirsters. Both Skarbrand and the regular Bloodthirster are still very healthy, and the Tzeentch army only has a severely injured Lord of Change and some depleted Xantagos left. LambSauceKing throws in the towel, giving Palpatine the win. GG to both Palpatine and LambSauceKing for this very fun best of 3, and congratulations to Palpatine for the win. In this final battle, unfortunately for Tzeentch, their lord was not prepared to deal with the double Bloodthirsters build, having no final transmutation to do any direct damage, and Plague of Rust plus Searing Doom are not exactly anti-character spells, unless you dump the Plague of Rust onto the Bloodthirster and shoot them with the pink horrors, but unfortunately the Plague of Rust were dumped on the Khorne Warriors instead. Xantagos and Halberd Warriors did some pretty good damage alongside the Sour Guts, but unfortunately the rest of the Tzeentch army wasn't doing that much in the rest of the battle, being outclassed in melee at every turn by the Khorne army. As for Khorne, the double Bloodthirsters did a lot of work throughout the battle, hunting down the Xantagos and then silencing the pink horror firepower. Then the Khorne Warriors actually did some really good damage over here. Same goes for the Khorne Marauders. Throwing Axes unfortunately got hunted down by the Tzeentch mobility, but that is fine because the melee infantry and the double Bloodthirsters carried the game for Khorne. And that's it for today's battles, and I hope you all enjoyed this rather long best of 3 video. We'll be showcasing more Total Warhammer multiplayer content, including more Warpstone Cup best of 3s, so be sure to subscribe to my channel and keep an eye out for new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.